On the day of the wedding, Jason's childhood sweetheart showed up in a wedding dress to stop the ceremony, standing beneath the stage and recounting the vows they once made. "Jason, I'm wearing a wedding dress for you now, do you still want to marry me?" Jason took my hand and said, "Those were childish promises that no longer count. The one I love now is Rachel." I didn't feel the slightest joy, because when Jason looked at her, his eyes couldn't hide the affection and reluctance. So, for both our sakes, I made a decision. Holding the ring, I walked up to a poised, aloof man and asked, "Would you marry me?" At the wedding, I stood beside Jason in a couture gown, holding my bouquet, as the officiant solemnly asked, "Mr. Jason, do you take Miss Rachel as your wife? As her husband, through sickness and health, poverty or wealth, will you stay together forever? Do you?" I glanced nervously at Jason in his sharp suit. "He won't say yes." Before he could speak, someone else interrupted. The venue fell into chaos. Jason immediately turned, and I followed his gaze. It was Elaine, his childhood sweetheart. "Jason, I know you don't want to marry her. You love me." Beneath the crystal chandelier, she walked gracefully down the flower-strewn aisle in a gown identical to mine. "Jason, do I look beautiful in a wedding dress?" Unfazed by everyone's eyes, Elaine lifted her gown and twirled. Standing center stage, she spoke of their old vows. "You promised to marry me when we grew up. I'm wearing the dress now, do you still want to marry me?" Silence fell as all eyes turned to Jason. He calmly took my hand in his, gently saying, "Those were youthful promises, not binding. I love Rachel now. I'm sorry if Miss Elaine misunderstood." To the crowd, he seemed noble. But as he spoke, he never once looked at me, his gaze never left Elaine, filled with unmistakable affection. Just like earlier, when he saw her, a flicker of joy flashed in his eyes. "What did you call me?" "Miss Elaine," she cried from below the stage, eyes brimming with tears, defiantly asking, "Jason, do you really not love me?" Elaine pointed at me. "If you don't love me, then why did you abandon her to pick me up at the airport? What do the months we spent together mean, then?" The day Elaine returned was the day of our engagement ceremony. Jason claimed he had an important project. I believed him, trying to be understanding, never realizing I was just a complete joke. Jason frowned slightly, tightening his grip on my hand. "So if I marry a stranger off the street, you wouldn't care either, right?" Elaine's gaze landed on my face, full of hatred. Then she ran from the church in tears. The farce ended, and the ceremony resumed. I signaled the officiant to pause, took the mic, and asked Jason, "Do you truly love me? Do you really want to marry me?" I knew it was a foolish question. Even if the answer was no, I needed to hear it from him. Jason's phone kept vibrating beside him, his mind was clearly elsewhere. "Jason, I'm at the plaza. If you don't show up in 30 minutes, I'll marry someone else." "I mean it." My grip on the bouquet tightened. Jason turned to me and said, "I'm sorry." Jason once again abandoned me for his childhood sweetheart, leaving me humiliated and alone to face everyone's ridicule. In that moment, I was fully awake. The only one he ever loved was Elaine, and I meant nothing to him. He always said he was busy with company projects. "I trust you with the wedding," he told me. So, I personally planned the wedding and cross-checked the guest list. I had been preparing for a long time. From the venue to the desserts, I carefully selected every detail. Now, all of it feels like a resounding slap across my face, burning with humiliation. I looked in the direction Jason had left, tossed aside the bouquet, and tore off the veil, letting it fall to the floor. My father stormed off, his eyes filled with disappointment, as if saying, "You can't even hold on to a man, you're worthless." I knew exactly what fate awaited me. I glanced around and retrieved my ring from the usher. Jason's ring flew in a perfect arc, landing with a clatter and rolling into an unnoticed corner. Lifting my gown, I descended the steps and stopped before the elegant, aloof man. "Would you take me away?" The man looked up with interest, eyes fixed on the ring in my hand. "Miss Rachel, is this a proposal? Ethan, would you marry me?" My palms were damp with cold sweat as I said it. The crowd gasped. Everyone whispered that I was insane for provoking Ethan, the Gu family heir. Has Miss Rachel lost her mind? Dumped by Jason, and now she's clinging to Ethan? Everyone knows Ethan is indifferent to women. Even if she wanted to spite Jason, choosing Ethan is asking for trouble. Ethan toyed with his wristwatch while the mocking voices around us continued. I began to waver and told myself to accept my fate. I pulled back the ring, ready to leave. Ethan pulled me into his arms, his lips brushing my ear. No backing out now. Before I could react, Ethan had already taken my hand and led me out of the church, leaving everyone stunned. Inside the car, the voluminous wedding dress took up the entire back seat. Ethan, thank you for earlier. As long as everyone knows you took me away, the Jiang family won't dare trouble me. I would never have to return to the suffocating Jiang household, where everything was about profit and freedom didn't exist. I spoke to the man in the driver's seat. Ethan, please drop me off at the next intersection. What for? Ethan shot me a sharp look through the rearview mirror. I still had a few belongings left behind and needed to return back at the apartment. I removed the intricate haute couture wedding gown and changed into something more comfortable. I left behind everything Jason had ever given me. I took only what was rightfully mine, not even a strand of hair was left for him. There were only 2 keys to the apartment. Jason had once said this place would be our home. I placed the key on the coffee table. From that moment on, I had no further ties to this place. I dragged my suitcase downstairs and saw Ethan leaning against the car, smoking. Dappled light and shadow fell across his figure. I was slightly surprised that he hadn't left yet. Noticing my presence, Ethan stubbed out his cigarette and started walking toward me. With his sharply defined fingers, he took my suitcase and asked, Rachel, did you bring your ID? I was momentarily puzzled. Was he trying to book a flight for me? But how did he know which city I was heading to? Yes, I brought it. Good, Ethan said with a rare smile, a departure from his usual indifference. Very soon, I realized what that smile truly meant. Ethan, aren't we heading to the airport? Why are we at the Civil Affairs Bureau? Airport? Weren't you planning to send me off? Ethan raised an eyebrow and stepped closer to me. What, Miss Rachel? Were all those things you said at the church lies? Who was the one who asked me to marry her? What now? Using me and then throwing me away? I had nowhere to retreat, my back pressed against the cold car window. The way he spoke made it sound like I had led him on and now was abandoning him. I gave a forced smile. Ethan, have you misunderstood something? Ethan lifted my chin, and a warm sensation suddenly pressed against my lips. My eyes widened instantly, my heart pounding. I even forgot to breathe. Rachel, you provoked me. Now you must take full responsibility. Leaving the Civil Affairs Bureau, I stared blankly at the freshly issued red marriage certificate. Today was supposed to be my wedding with Jason. I never imagined it would be ruined, and the person I registered the marriage with wasn't him, it was someone else. Ethan, without changing expression, took the red booklet from my hand. He even took all my documents, claiming it was for safekeeping in case I lost them. In truth, it was to prevent me from running away. In the living room, I opened my phone to find a stream of Facebook messages and missed calls. Today had been meant to be my unforgettable and beautiful wedding with Jason. Not wanting to be disturbed, I had set my phone to silent. Rachel, are you insane? I said I'd marry you, and I meant it. I'll give you a new wedding. Why are you making a scene? I already saved your face enough at the ceremony today. We're all adults, we should own up to our choices. Don't expect me to beg Ethan for forgiveness on your behalf later. Jason's words chilled me to the core. I replied, Jason, this is where it ends. All mismatched affections should be terminated in time, let's let each other go. Driven by masochism, I opened Elaine's Facebook and saw a photo of her kissing Jason in a wedding dress and tuxedo. It felt as if they were the true protagonists of today's ceremony. The caption read, childhood sweethearts belong together, even fate itself is unnecessary. Their words pierced me like a blade, leaving my soul metaphorically bleeding. My father roared, unfilial daughter. Stop disgracing me and come home to apologize to the Pei family. I was lost, I had been the one abandoned at the altar, yet somehow I bore all the blame. Unwilling to see more, I turned off the screen and asked the butler for a bottle of wine. By the time Ethan came downstairs, I was already drunk. Ethan looked at the half-empty bottle on the table and sighed helplessly. I staggered to my feet and nearly tripped, but his steady hand caught me by the waist. I tilted my head, mistaking him for Jason, and bit into the flesh of his hand. Ethan winced but said nothing. I cursed Jason as a heartless liar, cursing his entire ancestral line in a drunken frenzy. Ethan patted my head with mock disdain. "Rachel, you have terrible taste in men." I nodded in agreement, poking his chest. "Yes, I must have been blind to ever like you." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Rachel, look closely, who am I?" I tilted my head and replied, "Aren't you Jason?" Ethan gently lifted my hand to his cheek and looked into my eyes. "Rachel, take a good look, who am I, really?" I rubbed my eyes and leaned in close. His arm around my waist tightened, pulling me closer. "This way, I can see more clearly." Under the warm amber light, his intense gaze held mine. Ethan's defined features loomed close, and, captivated, I found myself leaning in for a kiss. Ethan's eyes flickered in surprise before he smiled faintly and pulled me in. My breath quickened, and my body softened in his embrace. Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed, his gaze dark and voice husky. "Rachel, remember, you initiated this." The bedroom door slammed shut. The world spun, and I found myself on Ethan's soft bed. My mind exploded with panic, and I instinctively resisted. But Ethan remained firm, murmuring at my neck, "Mrs. Ethan, this is perfectly legal, I'm certified for the role." Under Ethan's relentless coaxing, my thoughts began to blur. The room remained unlit, with moonlight seeping through sheer curtains, illuminating the fine sheen of sweat on Ethan's handsome face. I clutched his arm, my nails digging into his flesh. "Ethan, it hurts." His voice rasped with disbelief. "Jason never touched you?" Embarrassed, I covered my flushed face and shook my head. "Ethan, do you not know how?" He whispered in my ear, voice seductive, "The new territory awaits exploration, Mrs. Ethan must guide me." "Be good, it'll only hurt for a moment." Usually stern and aloof, a man as cold as I see at this moment, his eyes were filled with indescribable emotions. Just as Ethan was about to open the book and begin a new chapter, the phone rang incessantly. At a most inopportune time, it rang with a persistence that brooked no refusal. A droplet of water fell on my collarbone, surprisingly warm. Ethan cursed under his breath and handed me the phone. I hadn't meant to answer, but Ethan's restless hand startled me into tapping accept. "Sister-in-law, Jason's drunk. Can you come pick him up?" "Sister-in-law? Are you listening?" Ethan pressed his forehead against mine, eyes closed, trying to compose himself. "Still silent, huh?" I gasped for breath, struggling to steady myself. "Don't call me sister-in-law. Jason and I have broken up." "Rachel, stop pretending. I know you're just angry with me. You love me too much to actually break up." Jason chuckled carelessly. "Come pick me up, how about we make up?" "Jason, I'll say this one last time, we are over." From the moment he chased after his childhood sweetheart at our wedding, leaving me behind, that was the moment our relationship truly ended. Jason's friend whispered, "Jason, Rachel seems serious this time." "You've gone too far." "Serious?" "She's just being headstrong. Relax, give her 3 days, a week at most, and she'll be back." Jason scoffed indifferently. "Hasn't it always been this way?" "She came back even after I skipped our engagement ceremony." His friends nodded in agreement. "Jason has a point, Rachel loves you too much to stop just like that. Those who are favored always act with impunity." "But Jason, I've reached my limit, I'm tired, and I will not hesitate to let you go. Rachel, if you come back now, I'll pretend none of this ever happened." By the floor-to-ceiling window, Ethan held a cigarette, staring into the drooping night sky. Suddenly, he stubbed out the cigarette and walked toward the bed. He took my phone and said coldly into the call, "Is it the lonely, cold nights that made Mr. Jason develop a habit of eavesdropping?" "Who are you?" Ethan didn't answer, he simply glanced at me with a soft chuckle. "Don't contact my Rachel for any reason." We're busy handling important matters, don't disturb us. A sharp shatter of glass echoed through the receiver. Rachel. Who are you with? Before Jason could finish, Ethan had already hung up. I sat on the bed hugging my knees, emotions in turmoil. Ethan sighed helplessly, wrapped me in his arms, and gently patted my back. As if to comfort me, tears, betraying my will, splashed onto the back of my hand. If you've truly loved, how could you not be hurt? I told myself, Rachel, you're allowed to be sad, just for tonight. Tomorrow will be a brand new day. Ethan suddenly cupped my face, leveling his gaze with mine. Rachel, this is the last time. I don't want to see you cry for another man again. Ethan gently wiped away the tears at the corner of my eyes, his heart aching. After a moment, he pressed a kiss to my forehead. Go to bed early. I'll go shower. In the darkness, I gazed at his silhouette. Ethan. He stopped in his tracks and looked back. There's no rush, we have a long future ahead of us. I wanted to ask, Ethan, why are you so good to me? As far as I remember, Ethan and I never interacted much. I only remembered that one time I was sick with a fever. Jason offered to take me to the hospital, but left me halfway. He claimed he had an urgent project and told me to get a cab. It was drizzling. Without an umbrella, I stood alone under a bus stop to shelter from the rain. I nearly fainted, but Ethan appeared and took me to the hospital. He asked me, "Where's Jason?" I gazed out the car window at the shifting nightscape. "There's an urgent matter at his company," I replied. "Miss Rachel, do you really believe him that easily?" I said, "I trust him." To say I wasn't hurt would be a lie, but isn't being together all about wholehearted trust, especially when we are about to get married? Ethan said calmly, "I hope he proves worthy of Miss Rachel's trust." Looking back, that so-called important project must have been Elaine. I was so foolish to have genuinely believed he had work to attend to. My daily interactions with Ethan were fairly harmonious. Occasionally, when I was in a good mood, I would cook myself. Ethan, the usually aloof and pampered CEO, surprisingly offered to assist me. Even the villa's butler commented, "Young master has been acting oddly lately. He used to be all about work, returning home late, but now he leaves on time and sometimes even chuckles to himself." I too found it odd that Ethan, the typically reserved head of the Gu family, had changed so much. He had suddenly become so gentle, it was almost unsettling. After nearly a month off, Ethan finally agreed to let me return to work. Unfortunately, as soon as I arrived at the company entrance, I ran into Jason and Elaine. "Be good, go on ahead. I have something to handle," Jason said. From afar, Elaine glanced at me and clung to Jason's arm coquettishly. "Okay, Jason GE, remember to keep your distance from her." Jason patted her on the head indulgently and said, "All right." I walked past them as if nothing had happened. "Rachel." Jason approached with one hand in his pocket, trying to grab my hand. I stepped back twice, widening the distance between us. "Is there something you need? Getting distant with me so quickly?" "You're impressive, Rachel." Jason's hostility intensified as he gripped my hand tightly. "Rachel, who was that man with you that night?" "Jason, are you insane?" I looked at him coldly. "What right do you have to judge me? Don't forget, you're still my fiancé. And don't forget, you publicly abandoned me at our wedding for your childhood sweetheart. This engagement is void." Jason's eyes darkened with menace. He gritted his teeth. "Rachel, I'm asking one last time, where were you that night and who were you with?" "Who I'm with has nothing to do with you, Jason. You have no right to interfere." "Did you two sleep together?" Jason's eyes burned red. "Rachel, I've restrained myself all this time and didn't even touch you. How could you betray me like this? Tell me who he is. I'll make him pay dearly." The Jason in front of me, acting like a madman, felt like a stranger. He had never lost control like this in public before. I truly couldn't understand what kind of feelings he had for me. He loved Elaine, yet now pretended to be affectionate. Who was he trying to fool? Jason suddenly released my hand and reversed the blame. "Rachel, I just realized you're not as pure as I thought." It was 8 a.m., rush hour. People bustled at the office entrance, whispering quietly. "Is that Jason and his fiancée Rachel?" Wasn't Jason the one who abandoned his fiancé at the wedding not long ago? How did it become Rachel cheating with someone else now? Rachel looked sweet and gentle. I didn't expect her to be that kind of person, others chimed in. Rich families are full of drama, who can tell what's real or fake? Just enjoy the spectacle. Enough gossip, let's go. We're going to be late for work. I slapped Jason twice in front of everyone. The sound was so loud that even passers-by were stunned. Jason, the first slap was for deceiving and abandoning me, the second was for publicly defaming me. A vivid handprint appeared on Jason's handsome face, but instead of anger, he sneered. Haven't seen you for nearly a month, and you've grown quite the temper, Rachel. What spell did that bastard cast on you to make you like this? When I loved you, of course you saw the best of me. Now that I don't, why should I restrain myself? I no longer wish to entangle with him. But just as I took 2 steps forward, several suited bodyguards blocked my path. Miss, please return. And if I refuse? Apologies, Mississippi. Your father instructed that if you resist, we are authorized to use force to escort you back. The bodyguard paused before continuing. Also, Miss, your father said not to forget that your mother's ashes are still in the Jiang household. Never did I imagine that my own biological father would resort to such a despicable threat. My hands clenched tightly at my sides, then fell weakly. I'll go back with you, I said. Upon returning to the Jiang residence, I was slapped the moment I stepped into the courtyard. It was my father, and he struck with full force. I was completely unprepared, staggered, and nearly collapsed. You ungrateful daughter. How dare you show your face here? First, you humiliated yourself at the wedding and offended the Gu family, then the Pei family, and now you dare slap Jason in public. Rachel, do you intend to ruin the Jiang family? Go to the Pei family now and apologize, restore the engagement. Otherwise, don't blame me for marrying you off to someone else. I have never had freedom in the Jiang family. To him, I was merely a tool to secure ties with powerful families, something to be given away at will. In his eyes, I was never a daughter. At 18, just after coming of age, Jiang Wuliang lured me to a hotel under the pretense of celebrating my birthday, when in fact, he intended to hand me over to a businessman in his 40s or 50s. Please him well, and the Jiang family gets the deal. In that moment, my world collapsed. I had never imagined my own father could betray me like this. I felt as if trapped in a pitch-black, airtight cellar, fearful, suffocating, and hopeless. I resisted with all my might, grabbing a vase and smashing it over his head. I wanted to run, but guards outside made escape impossible. That night, I thought endlessly. If I couldn't escape, I would jump from the 26th floor, to end it all. Just as despair consumed me, Jason burst in and rescued me, holding me tightly, fear written all over his face. It's over, Rachel. Don't be afraid. In that moment, it felt like a warm beam of light shone upon me. I clung to him, sobbing uncontrollably. Later, Jason told me he loved me and wanted to marry me. My father only dropped the idea because of the Pei family. I said nothing, walking past him into the house. Rachel. Stop right there. Looking for this? I froze in my tracks, dread rising in my chest. Turning around, I saw my father holding the urn that should have been in my bedroom. The Jiang family's position today wasn't easily earned. I don't care how you do it, as long as you marry into the Pei family, I'll give it back to you. He claimed the incident at the wedding caused Jiang Group's stock to plummet and sabotaged a pending deal. But for years, the Pei family supplied him with resources. It was he who failed to capitalize. Now, he blamed it all on me. Isn't that laughable? I rushed toward him. Give it back. You're not worthy to hold it. He scowled at my defiance. Crash, the urn fell and shattered, white ashes spilling across the floor. The string in my mind snapped. Eyes blazing, I lunged at him in rage, but before I could reach him, the bodyguards shoved me to the ground. My father snorted coldly. Rachel, you won't even listen to your old man now? Don't forget, you owe everything you are today to me. I looked up at the sky, heart heavy. Mother, this is the man you loved most of your life, selfish, deceitful, and utterly heartless. Back then, Madame Jiang looked down on my mother's rural background. My father repeatedly sweet-talked her. Once I convince my mother, I'll come get you and Rachel. My mother foolishly waited and waited. Even I could see, he'd never return. But she scolded me, Rachel, your father will come back for us. What came instead was news of his remarriage. My mother sank into constant sorrow, and even on her deathbed she said, Rachel, don't blame your father. He must have had his reasons. He loves us. Later, he did come back, for me. He treated me well enough to give me away like merchandise, and say without flinching, Rachel, try to understand. Running a company is hard. I didn't want this either. When Jason arrived, I was kneeling under the blazing sun, gathering my mother's ashes. Rachel, are you all right? He asked. I didn't look at him. Jason squatted beside me and said, stop being so stubborn. If you had yielded to me earlier, it wouldn't have come to this. I paused my movement, staring at the man in front of me in disbelief. We had once truly loved and protected each other. How had he become someone so unrecognizable? Jason, leave. I pointed toward the exit. Get out. Rachel, look at what time it is. Are you still mad at me? Without me, who else can protect you in North City? Who said Jason is the only one who can protect her in North City? Came a cold voice from behind. It was Ethan, flanked by 2 bodyguards. At the sight of Ethan, a strange glint flickered in Jason's eyes. Ethan cast him a contemptuous glance, but his expression softened the moment he saw me. He walked over holding an umbrella, just like he had once done at the bus stop. Rachel? My face was sunburned. I held the urn and gently shook my head. I'm fine. Ethan frowned deeply, his eyes filled with concern. Let me take you home. The bodyguards took the umbrella as Ethan bent down and carried me in his arms. Jason rushed out. Ethan, what do you mean? Rachel is my fiancé. Your fiancé? Ethan scoffed coldly. She stopped being that the moment you abandoned her at the altar. Rachel belongs to me now. You'd better stay away from her. It was you that night. Jason froze, taking a long time to process it. You bastard, Ethan, he shouted, charging forward like a madman, only to be stopped after a few steps by Ethan's bodyguards. Jason struggled to break free and fight Ethan, forgetting that Ethan was not someone he could afford to offend. With a casual wave of Ethan's hand, the 2 bodyguards easily slammed Jason to the ground. Watching Ethan take me away, Jason fell to his knees in despair, his eyes reddened as he pleaded, Rachel, don't go. Please don't leave with him. I know I was wrong. I truly know now. I admit I had trouble letting go of Elaine, but now I realize it's you I love, and only you. I used to take your love for granted, thinking you would never leave me. Rachel, come back. I'll break up with Elaine. We can get married this month, all right? No, let's get married tomorrow. Please, Rachel. Let's pretend this was all a bad dream and make things right again. I had never seen Jason so wretched, nor imagined he could ever be this humble. Perhaps Ethan's presence had awakened his sense of crisis, and he realized he truly loved me. He also knew that if I left with Ethan this time, I would never return to him again, but it was all too late. The Rachel of the past might have forgiven him without hesitation, but the person I am now would not. If only he had been more resolute, if only he hadn't wavered between me and Elaine, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. If love is destined to fail, it's better to hand in the test early. I said calmly, Jason, I don't love you anymore. Yes, I no longer loved him. I thought I would be heartbroken upon seeing him again, that I would scream and fight, but I felt none of that. When I saw him and Elaine at the company gate, I was utterly calm, my heart unmoved. Jason turned pale. Rachel, don't say that in anger. I know you love me. You wouldn't bear to give me up. Ethan gently placed me in the back seat, removed his suit jacket, and loosened his collar. He calmly rolled up his sleeves, his face cold as ice, then strode to Jason and landed 2 fierce punches on his face. Jason, don't you dare push your luck, flirting with my woman right in front of me. Do you think I'm already dead? Jason, unwilling to back down, swung a punch at Ethan's face. Ethan, I've had enough of your arrogance. Rachel is my fiancé, you have no right to take her away. But his punch missed as Ethan dodged swiftly. The two men descended into a public brawl, completely disregarding their image. No right? Rachel is my wife, what more right do I need? The air turned ice cold. Jason's clenched fists fell limply to his sides. He looked past Ethan, staring at me. Is it true, what he said? I got out of the car, walked over to Ethan, and took his hand. We're legally married, on the day of the wedding. Jason staggered backward, as if struck by lightning. The malice in Ethan's eyes vanished, replaced by joy. He shook our interlocked hands in front of Jason, childishly. Jason, stay away from my wife from now on. A few days later, I returned to the small town where my mother and I once lived, this time, not alone, but with Ethan. Back then, my father refused to allow my mother's burial, insisting her ashes be kept at the Jiang residence, as if she were still alive, still by his side. Only now do I realize he may not have loved her that deeply. Or perhaps they once loved each other, as she claimed. But in the wear and tear of time, the man who loved her faded away, becoming someone unrecognizable. Ethan gently asked, Rachel, may I help you? I knew what he meant. But this time I wanted to do it myself. If my father cared about nothing more than the Jiang group, then I would let him witness its downfall with his own eyes. I met secretly with several of the company's board members, his most trusted allies. At first, they dismissed me with scorn, but soon, they bowed with deference. All these years, I was not the useless heiress they imagined. I rose from an entry-level position to general manager in the Pei Group. Through me, the Pei family lent great support to Jiang Group, but I never wanted to be in their debt. So I worked diligently, securing hundreds of projects for them. But to my father, what could a girl possibly understand? Everything I achieved, he credited to Jason. Even within the company, many believed I had relied on connections. I've learned not to care about others' opinions, as long as I live with a clear conscience. At the Jiang Group board meeting, Jiang Wuliang saw me seated at the head. He snapped, what right do you have to sit there? I smiled. Perhaps you should ask your assistant and these directors whether I have that right. At my words, the entire board silently lowered their heads, pretending not to see. Furious, he slammed the table. Don't forget whose name this company bears, who it belongs to. I took the document from the assistant and flung it at him. Take a look, Director Jiang. I am now the largest shareholder. His eyebrows twisted with rage as he tore the paper to shreds. Rachel. You ungrateful daughter. I should have strangled you at birth. You think this will bring me down? Never. Not yet, but very soon, it will. I rose and walked behind him, running my fingers over the back of his chair. My dearest father, don't worry. Someone will come soon to invite you for tea, premium tea. No sooner had I spoken than a knock came at the door. My father was stunned when he saw the police. Several uniformed officers displayed their badges. Who here is Mr. Jiang? I am. What's the matter? The officer glanced at him and said, You are suspected of criminal enterprise and intentional homicide. Please come with us for investigation. During the investigation, it was discovered that my father was involved in multiple criminal activities. Worse yet, he caught his current wife cheating, and in a fit of rage, pushed her from the 16th floor to her death. He staged it as a suicide, clearing himself entirely. He turned and glared at me, eyes filled with murderous hate. I only ever wanted a quiet life, but you forced me to this point. He also taught me, constant submission only emboldens the other side to go even further. Initially, I wanted to bring down Jiang Group entirely. But then I thought, our grudges shouldn't be paid for by the employees. Most of them have families to support, elderly parents or young children, and some are fresh graduates. Life is already difficult, We should not make it even harder for them. From another perspective, having the Jiang Corporation fall into the hands of the daughter he most despised is a kind of torment in itself. As I walked out of the office with my bag, I saw Ethan. He stood not far away, arms wide open towards me. I rushed into his arms, feeling an overwhelming sense of security. "Why are you here?" "To bring my wife home." I tiptoed and kissed his face. "Thank you, Ethan, for picking me up and taking me home." I never imagined that this simple gesture would drive Ethan to become so intense. A 30-minute journey was forcibly cut in half. As soon as the door shut, he pinned me to it and kissed me deeply, the kiss growing more intense. His hand on my waist began to roam restlessly. Our first time didn't even wait until we got to the bedroom. Ethan's long fingers slowly slid into my palm, entwining with mine. "Rachel, relax, don't be nervous." "Rachel, does it still hurt?" "No, it doesn't." He asked in a hoarse voice. "Rachel, do you like it?" His hands didn't stop their motion. My face instantly turned as red as a boiled shrimp, and I clung to him tightly, avoiding an answer. "Rachel, if you don't speak, does that mean you don't like it?" "It's okay, I'll make you love it." Ethan carried me from the foyer to the sofa, then to the bedroom, overpowering me with his strength. By the time he stopped, I was so exhausted I didn't even want to move a finger. In a daze, I felt Ethan slip something cold onto my ring finger. Then he stretched his arm and pulled me into his embrace, his warm lips pressing against my forehead. "Rachel, let's get married." I saw Jason again at a banquet. I attended the banquet, arm in arm with Ethan, as Mrs. Ethan. Halfway through, I got a bit hungry, and Ethan went to get me some snacks. Jason walked over, exhaustion in his eyes, and spoke softly. "Is he good to you?" "He's very good to me." "If I hadn't left on our wedding day, would we be happy now?" I took a sip of juice and slowly looked at him. "Jason is in the past. What's the point of speculating? It's better to live well in the present." "Jason, brother." Elaine angrily walked over in high heels, glancing at me. "Jason, you just can't forget her?" Jason rubbed his forehead in impatience. "Elaine, can we talk about this later?" "Jason, I'm tired. I've had enough of you." Elaine clenched her skirt, staring at him stubbornly. "I'll ask you one last time, do you still love me?" The air around us froze for a moment. Jason whispered, "You shouldn't have returned to the country." Elaine's eyes shimmered with tears. "Jason, if you didn't like me, you should have cut ties with me back then. You shouldn't have given me false hope." Jason explained, "I'm sorry, I thought that was love. Later, I realized I only saw you as a sister." The wine glass in Elaine's hand suddenly dropped, and she choked as she said, "Sister? I don't want to be what you call a sister. If you don't like me, you could have just told me. I'm Elaine, and I'm not desperate for you." Jason lowered his gaze, parted his lips, and found himself unable to argue. Elaine wiped her tears, turned, and bowed to me. She kept a smile. "Rachel, I'm sorry for what I've done to hurt you. Whether you forgive me or not, I want to sincerely apologize here. Love makes people foolish and can blind their eyes. After experiencing it, being disappointed, and waking up, one finally realizes what kind of person they truly loved." I watched Elaine leave resolutely, then said to Jason, "You've lost the person who loved you most in this world." Elaine truly loved Jason, though sometimes she could be a bit extreme. Sometimes, I think Jason really is a jerk. Maybe it would be better for him to grow old and lonely. "Rachel, you've been waiting for a long time, right?" Ethan came over with a tray of snacks, also taking the opportunity to put his arm around my shoulder, marking his territory to Jason. "Mr. Jason, you're welcome to attend Rachel and my wedding next month." Jason's body stiffened, looking dejected, as he drank one glass of wine after another. Ethan had already taken me and left. "Ethan, are you planning to feed pigs with all this? You're pregnant now, you need to eat more." As we left, Ethan carried me out of the banquet hall. I was just 1 month pregnant, and he was always afraid I might hurt myself, being extra careful. On the day I was confirmed pregnant, he carefully held me, as happy as a child. He spoke in a daze. "Rachel, I'm going to be a father. This is my first time being a dad." I replied, am I becoming a mother for the second time? He even went to ask the doctor what to do as a first-time father. The doctor was dumbfounded. In the evening, I snuggled in Ethan's arms as he read pregnancy care tips and bought baby supplies. I asked how he knew if it was a boy or a girl. He said, we'll buy everything, we're having two. The boy can protect Rachel when he grows up, and the girl will be our little warm coat. Ethan, I've always wanted to ask you something. What is it? When did you start liking me? I fell in love with Rachel at first sight. Actually, Ethan and Rachel had known each other for a long time. Ethan was surrounded and bullied by a group of people, with everyone calling him an orphan. They called him a shameful illegitimate child. After his mother passed away, his father remarried, and all the affection went to another son, which made everyone believe he was a bastard. He silently lowered his head, not saying a word. A little girl with pigtails jumped out and stood in front of him. Hey, are you stupid? If they bully you, fight back. That was the first time anyone had helped him, the first time someone told him it was okay to fight back if bullied. His father said, if you don't provoke others, they won't bully you. His father also said, if you hit someone, it's your fault, and would punish him by making him kneel at the ancestral hall and not allow him to eat. Ethan asked her, what if there's someone you don't like and can't beat? I used to be bullied a lot. My mom told me, she said that only if you are strong enough, others won't dare to bully you, they will fear you. Later, Ethan, with this lesson in mind, became the powerful figure in the Gu family. After learning about his situation, the little girl sat beside him and said, I don't have a mother either, but it's okay. My mom told me that when people die, they become stars. When you miss them, just look up at the sky. Become a star. That day, Ethan also stared at the sky for a long time when he grew up and realized she was Rachel, and that she had someone she loved. He only wished for her happiness. Later on, he fulfilled his wish and married the little girl he had met back then. Treat time with gentleness, and time will respond in kind. A destined bond will eventually unite two hearts as one.